Hey, that was really weird. For anyone who was not on the previous live stream, it just kind of just suddenly crashed. So we are trying again, and I actually just got to the section Appendix Penultimillennial Crypt Cults. I'm gonna wait for people to actually show up this time. Um, hey, Mark. So what I'm going to do is whenever I back this up to YouTube, I guess I'm just going to stitch them together. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what's going on with my setup, but let's try this again. Appendix, penultimillennial crypt cults. Characteristics. 1. Flatline materialism. The crypt is nothing outside an experiment in artificial death, hyperproduction of the positive zero plane, neuroelectronic immanence invested by a continually reanimated thanatechnical connectivism. This fact carries inevitable consequences for the cultures that populated, uprooting them into unlife, or the non-zone of absolute betweenness, whose spirodynamics of sorcerous involvement are alone sufficient to reach the submesh tracks of cyber-gothic continuum. Flatline materialism designates the objectless crypt voyage itself as Lemurian body fusion at matter degree 0. Oh, Mohammed, don't do that to me. No, it's Nick Land. It's fine. He's constantly high. What can be wrong with that? He loves psychoanalytics and drugs. Cheers to that. 2. Digital hyperstation. Nothing propagates itself through the crypt without realizing that the operational identity of culture and machinery, effectively dismantling the organic body into numerizing particles which swarm in dislocated swirls. Crypt entities are both hypervortical singularities and units of digital hyperstition, or brands of the outside, real components of numerical fictions that make themselves real, providing the practical matter of sorcery, spirogenesis, or productive involvement that function consistently with a flat line. Crypt cultures know nothing of work or meaning. Instead, they coincide with hype spirals, cyberhype, that flattens signs and resources onto non-signifying triggers, diagrams, and assembly jargons. I think if I had stimulants in my body, I would actually understand that. That feels like it could be a coherent sentence. 3. Lesbo Empiric contagion libido. I forgot this part. 3. Lesbo Empiric contagion libido. Crypt sorcery makes itself real in the same way that it spreads. Functioning as a plague, it associates with the experimental production of an anticlimactic or anorgasmic countersexuality, attuned to the collective re-engineering of bodies with techno-bionic assemblages, ultimately composed of electronic streams or ionic currents in their current sense of positive whole flow. Subtle misogyny there, Nick Land. Since crypt sex is precisely identical to the infections it transmits, counted in body-shifting vectors, its libidinal composition is marked both by paleoembryonic or estrogenetic, non-gendered femininity and a lateral amyometallic influenzoid virulence. Love that continental misogyny, Nick Land. Oh yeah. 4. Y2K positive calendric agitation. Calendric. Crypt cultures spill into the closed economy of history through a rupture in chronological ordering, punctually triggered at time 0. Crypt rumor consistently allocates its own contemporary emergence, or its unearthing, to impending millennial cyber skits, as in schizo. Cyberspace time disintegration under the strategically aggravated impact of Y2K missile. Whilst multiply differentiated, most crucially by the division between continuism and sentience, crypt cults are constitutively involved in the singular nexus of counter-Gregorian calendric subversion, celebrating the automatic redating of the machinic unconscious and hyping the dissolution of commemorative significance into digital time mutation, catalyzed by numerical and lexical operative signals. The crypt exists from before the origin of time, but it begins at year zero. And this is the next section of the cultures. The A-death phenomenon, and for clarification, if anyone's watching who hasn't read Nick Land before, he is using A as a prefix, as an A alpha, similar to the way he uses K. And it's not part of the word, it is a prefix notating singularity, hierarchical uniformity, so on and so forth, because he's a freak. He's the Shakespeare of speed. The A-death phenomenon. Has death itself become a telecommodity? Yes, it has. A dark tide of scare stories and morbid rumor increasingly suggests so. By the late 90s, leery psychedelic utopianism seems to have contracted out to the nihilistic slogan, turn on to tune out, to cite a recent release by Cat to Jungle Outfits, XX Ignol. This ain't sex and drugs and rock and roll no more. According to Doug Frushley, spokesman for the Christian Coalition for Natural Mortality, the so-called A-death menace is an almost unimaginable desecration of divine and natural law. This craze is an abomination without parallel. It trades on its intrinsic lethality, and it's growing incredibly fast. No one can say it isn't dangerous. Something is truly evil happening to our youngsters, something beyond 60s sexuality. I just need a moment. Let's see if I can get in on that. Can you read that? Okay. Right. That's amazing. Literally 666 duality. That's brilliant. It's amazing. That has to not be a real person. That's just brilliant. The result is an entire jungle of positive zero fugues. Phenotechnic, sarcolepsy, snuff stims, K-zombification, electrovampirism, necronomics, cathaltronics, 9 million ways to die. A-death is a hybrid product involving convergences between at least 4 distinct lines of rapid technocultural transformation. A-death combines micropause abuse, deliberately reversed biotechnesis, with immersion coma time aberrances, generating, modulating, rescaling sentience whole Zarkon lapses. These are toned by synatives, artificial drugs, in parentheses, because he had to clarify, which add zone texture and spliced into hyperstation trances and cultural events. Social statistics indicate that the typical A-death user is 15 years old. Terrible. Following the most ominous threads of A-death reportage takes you inexorably down into the digital underworld of the crypt, the dark tween of the net, where Gibsonian flatlining is rapidly transmuting from exotic fiction into pop cult and mass transit system. You could describe it as the route to contemporary shamanism. Suggest A-death cultists of the cybergoth, late abortion club. After all, AOL spells Loa backwards, but we call ourselves post-vitalists. It's a voodooan term, Loa. How long have the late abortionists been active on the A-death scene? There are disturbing tales of K-space zombie makers, sorcerers on the plane of virtual nightmare, whose digital spine-biting centipedes yield the soft tox juice that opens up the limbic gates. Crypt initiates confirm as its arterial access low way is signposted, main flat line under construction. Answers vary confusingly from extravagance, around about 60 million years, through vagueness, sometime, to mystic compression, since now. In other respects, accounts of the contemporary A-death scene in its recent history prove remarkably consistent. In particular, the one name to turn up incessantly is that of Dr. Oscar Zarkon, biomechanician, techno-genius, one of the most controversial figures in scientific history. Zarkon's polymathy is attested by the variety of fields to which he has centrally contributed, including transfinite analysis, neural nets, distributed God, I'm sorry. I may have had a beer or two because McLeod. Let's try this again. Zarkon's polymathy is attested by the variety of fields to which he has centrally contributed, including transfinite analysis, neural nets, distributed computing, swarm robotics, xenopsychology, access engineering, and yet it was the resolutely sober ecumenist rather than, for instance, Freshly's excitable End Times, which dedicated the cover and major editorial of its March 1988 issue to the question, Zarkon, Satan of cyberspace. Zarkon has become emblematic of the ways in which technological dreams go bad. In the words of fellow Axis researcher and social thanatropist, Dr. Zeke Burns, what makes Zarkon's input into the ADEF thing so incomparable that it crosses between all of the key component technologies? The biotechmeticist's work is so outstanding that it tends to overshadow his equally path-breaking research into adjacent fields. The Zarkon formulae for non-metric causation, for example, have provided the first rigorous basis for IC, immersion coma, control. The links between biotechmeticus and IC weren't remotely anticipated before the Zarkon zip, which mathematically models biocontinual assemblages. Finally, there are synatives, about which he is understandably evasive, even though he was theorizing artificial or digital neurotechnic pharmaceuticals in the mid-'80s. The aggregate result of all of his pioneering science, a generation of teenagers lost in schizotechnic death cults. If it weren't against like a fundamental tenet of my religion, I think I would probably get that tattooed like as a tramp stamp. That's an iconic line. Occultures, section, between and beneath the net. Mesh note O. It could all become one, but why stop there? The Gibsonian cyberspace mythos describes the electro-digital infosphere first integrating into a godlike unitary being, a techno-realized omniscient personality, and later, when it changed, fragmenting into demons modeled on the Haitian Loa. What makes this account so anomalous in relation to technological theology in the light capitalist time is that unity is placed in the middle as a stage or interlude to be passed through. It is not the one becomes many, expressing the monopolized divine power of an original unity, but rather that a number or numerousness finds no completion in the achievement of unity, moves on ever since the beginning when the K-Goths first heard of that cyberspace was destined to be God. They've done what they can to rip it down. Mesh note 1, this was never programmed. MIT codes time going backwards, a compacted techno-streaming from out of the future, AI downloading swarm robotics, nanotechnology, crustal matter preparing for takeoff. Minsky mumbles, strangely entranced. Amongst all those young, brilliant, pioneering minds, none burned more brightly than Oscar Zarkon. A hint of tears in his eyes, as if lamenting the way things went, which is understandable. Have you seen Oscar lately, Marvin? He's wired up to some sort of interface gizmo, and it seems to be eating away at him, gnawing at him on a molecular level. Sounds that way, too, when he speaks, or tries to, as if they're melting or rotting together. It isn't pretty, but more than any of this, which, after all, only concerns one man, or what used to be one, so they say, there's a suspicion that something has gone horribly wrong in the near future whenever Zarkon was dropped back from is where we're all going to be, if that even makes any sense, and recalling the slow techno-slime incursion into Oscar's space, which still managed to be a hideous half-smile. Hi, Marvin. What do you think? Minsky seriously doubts it. Mesh note 2, meshing together is falling apart. If genius means anything, Zarkon was one. Where Minsky's MIT team dreamt of marrying humans and electronic technology, Zarkon got straight down to the mechanics of coupling and the mathematical exactitude, just to the added effect of hyper-abstract techno-pornography. Strange lights in his eyes, you know, we're really going to do this. Take the Zarkon SIP as exemplary, a rigorous conceptual machine part that enables brain function to be fused onto virtual processor states. Once it's running, you can't unpick the zigzag of who's what as it hums. Total meshing. This is no longer technology, but something else. True interlinkage, an unprogrammable raw connectivity Minsky remembers his musing over. I wonder what it feels like. Mesh note 3. This time, it's really happening. Moravec wasn't normally associated with a squeamishness. He'd already suggested burning out the brain in layers during transfer to digital. So it crept insidiously under the skin when he remarked, I don't even recognize Oscar anymore. It's just getting too weird. You know, he's always had this thing about being abducted by aliens as a kid. Anyway, he says that's all over now. It came from someplace else, apparently beneath and between the net, he says. At times, it's like you're talking to a machine. Trouble is, it's a sick machine, infectious sick. Mesh note 4, forget about the future. It's all here, but between. They say Axis went mad, the first computer system to undergo psychotic collapse, which must prove something, but Zarkon argues all it meant was that it had just learned to think and discovered continuum. He stuck with it all the way down, becoming confused with it, although he doesn't put it that way. Last time anyone can follow, he was insisting that the head into time makes more sense than traveling into the future. That's why tomorrow cancels itself into the mesh. No point departing from infinite, trans-infinite now. His tone had become nakedly fanatical. We all have to get into this thing, whichever way it cuts. We aren't going to get over it. No one knows exactly when he left. Mesh note 5. Every time it hits an obstacle, it goes down a level. What is this stuff? They speak of something crawling under the net like a fungal pestilence, triggering electronal subsidence into sheer electricity, things hiding in the power grid, some kind of quantum unlife intelligence. The utilities try to re-scramble it, but it isn't easy. According to the rumors, there's an MIT paper proving it's impossible, but you certainly can't ignore, less still traffic with it. You'd end up like Zarkon, whatever or wherever that is, and you'd have to be K-goth crazy to go there, the cyberskits mesh cults where life doesn't matter anymore. Occultures, section, tick delirium. Under pressure. Thomas Gould's model of the deep, hot biosphere reallocates hydrocarbon deposits to an expanded anorganic chemistry derived from supernovae debris and accreting into planets from interstellar dust clouds, all of which everything flows bottom up. Descent into the Earth leads out of the solar system in accordance with the xenoplutonic cosmic productivity transmitted through slow-release deep intraterrestrial methane reservoirs, pressure stabilized against thermic dissociation. A vast mass of archaean microbes and submicrobial nanopopulations exploit this upwelling anorganic hydrocarbon flow by scavenging loosely bound oxygen, reducing ferric iron to magnetite. Project SCAR, Southern Borneo, November 1980. Outside the monitoring hut, a tropical storm is slowly building. Irregular rain spatters heavily, rhythmically intermeshing with typed taps and clicks. Barker hunches over the humming machine, lost in theoretical trawling through SETI-connected tick-tock tapes, and scrambling cryptic dot clusters and factor strings into hints of alien contact. Xenotation is clicking together as a mathematical anti-memory where things meet. You can easily think it was initiation, but it's all coming to an end in scatter tactics, particle streaks, and tachyonic transferences. drawing out the twisted trajectories of numerical disorganization, and underneath or between the implacable ticking of the time missile, trying to figure it out, and somewhere you cross over, which is problematic in many various ways. Unexpected difficulties infiltrate the calculations, tick systemic interchatter implexes through plutonic torsion, a descent into the outside. When NASA sees Barker's report, it flips, non-metaphorically, into another phase. Passage through institutional criticality occurs spontaneously, conversion of stacked tectonic torsion, triggering some type of latent security reflex, or bureaucratically fabricated suppressor instinct, extrapolating the exact effective correlate of anthropol. They were waiting for this, waiting for a long time. The investigation was disguised as a psychiatric recording, hidden even from itself. This was shortly after the stuttering started, drifting in on a wave of body ticks, microspastic tremors on a multiplication of mixed signals, and chronometric tick-tock melting into jungle noises, clips and chirps of the cicadas, insectoid chittering, static take-up minerals for the tick bites, tinnitus intercut with rhythmic pattern virus, sub-semiotic staccato of throat-scratching tick chatter stitched into the talk sickness, calling demons. It gets confusing the way tick fictions take or stick. They said it was due to excessive pressure. Much later, they told me this, that these were the facts, and the rest was fiction. Immediately after the breakdown, I had been taken back to the States to a medical installation. So everything happened in America, to a medical installation. So Jesus Christ, I forgot that part. I just lost my page. Give me a moment. Okay. They said it was due to excessive pressure. Much later, they told me this. These were the facts, and the rest was fiction. Immediately after the breakdown, I had been taken back to the States to a medical installation. So everything happened in America, and it all checked out. There was no contact, no tick disease, no flight into the jungle. They were insistent about that. Barker was born on the night of the dead, folded into the end from the beginning sketched out. It's evident now with his ID meticulously compiled, social tag numbers, educational and medical records, security clearance evaluations, research checks, neurocartographic printouts, psychometric data, conclusions formatted for rapid scanning with columns of tick boxes. What do you make of these? The doctor snorts derisively. You mean that nonsense about a tick-borne infection? It was obviously made up, tacked on. It would have been a cruel coincidence, if true, to be stricken by tick bite sickness after everything that had been suggested. Stigmatic residue of a flight into the jungle, that had never happened. But somehow it stuck, latching on to mammal heat or the smell of blood. The tick is a parasitic arachnid. It has been long considered as an ethics packet that climbs, sticks, and sucks, functioning as a vector for numerous things: tack-on, stickers, hallucinations, tinnitus, buzz clicks, microsonic teaming, semi-sentient flickering across the feverscape, skin tracked by infected suck marks that snake along the veins, tick dots, or IV punctures, according to them, from the sedatives and antipsychotics, all accounted for in the medical logs, plus the tick delirium tacked on, because there was no flight into the jungle, only high-frequency hallucinations of parasitic micro-multitudes, itching skin swarms. With tick systems, anything will do. Each intensive numerousness attaches onto another numerousness of lower organicity, subcellular animations and sub-semiotic tokens, high-pressure chemistry, phasing down into the nanomachining, electron traffic, magnetic anomalies, and fictional particles. Ticks, which there are never less than several, or anything whatsoever when caught by numerical propagations whose thresholds are descents and whose varieties depend upon the phase considered. They seem to think it was about arachnobugs, biological taxonomy, and bite signatures, as if the tick delirium was representing something. All that really mattered were the numbers, which could have been anything. At first, the machines became erratic, with an almost imperceptible electronic glitching, micro-variations of the magnetic weather, rhythmic disturbances. Out in the jungle was called Umno, but that never happened. Nothing happens to Barker except downwards, and that's the catch, that's the ticket. Inverse climbings of the heat pressure gradient, escalations in intensity, time crossings. How can it be the end already in the middle of the beginning, as the problem is posed in Pandemonium whenever, the aftertime of Omno, the cryptic ticking of chthonic unclocks mark an incursion from beneath or between. Down there it is forever turning into itself through the electromagnetic cataracts of the bell, whose body neurometallic click storms feel like sinking out of chronicity. Beyond surface chauvinism and solar parochialism, vortical stickiness of the tick matrix. Occultures section, the excruciation of Humpty. According to the AOE, I don't recognize that acronym. According to the AOE, magical metahistory millennia come in pairs, ruled by the dyadic. According to the AOE, magical metahistory millennia come in pairs, ruled by dyadic divinities entitled the powers that be. This doctrine corresponds to the astrological observation that every 2,000 years the equinoxes precess or slide backwards, and a new zodiacal aeon begins. AOE Magi interpret each aeon as an astrochthonic marriage. In the Gregorian year zero, which never took place, the Humpa, the great Babylonian worm, was coupled with the celestial logos Tadam, initiating the age of Pisces, which is now rushing towards unbirth. The mathematician and occultist Charles Lutwidge Dodgson, that was hell of a guy, whose precise relation to the AOE remains cryptic and ambivalent, dedicated his life's work to the understanding of the final degenerative phase of each epoch of Humpty. Writing under the pseudonym Lewis Carroll, he introduces his heroine, Alice, to the mad despot and homo-phys-technician, thinly disguised by the folk name Humpty Dumpty. We find the Humpty, the squirming word, whose name means the shape it is, perched precariously on the supposedly impenetrable wall of signification. Something shattering about is about to hatch. The aeonic fragility of Humpty is soon confirmed by a calendric calculation of unbirthdays, counted to the n-1, through which meaning subsides into the subliteral mechanic efficiency of numbers. And that shows that there are 364 birthdays that you might get unbirthday presents. Certainly, said Alice, and the only one for birthday presents, you know. That's glory for you. I don't know what you mean by glory, Alice said. Humpty Dumpty smiled contemptuously. Of course you don't, till I tell you. I meant there's a nice little knockdown argument for you. But glory doesn't mean a nice knockdown argument, Alice objected. When I use a word, Humpty Dumpty said in a rather scornful tone, it just means what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less. The question is, said Alice, whether you can make words mean different things. The question is, said Humpty Dumpty, which is to be master, that all. The Gregorian Ocumenon is about to receive an unbirthday present, and it knows exactly when. Y2K, a knockdown argument without argument, arrives as a gift-wrapped time bomb whose operational semiotic triggers the crash of arbitrary signs. It's a different thing. There's glory for you. AD 2000 commemorates nothing but fuzz, as Y2K impacts on the capitalist infosphere. What hides as the anniversary of Christ's birth emerges as the excruciation of Humpty. For 2 millennia, the earth has been under the dominion of the dyadic squirming word, the logos of John's gospel, but recycled, and thus far older. Impenetrability, that's what I say. Humpty Dumpty. or he or they strategically occupy both sides at once according to a criterion of impenetrability, positioned to choose either in every case, but never apprehending what lies in between. Humpatatum, whilst definitely not a Dogon egg, is a scrambled version of the demon Babakis, poached from the Lemurian time sorcery, master of words, but not of numbers. Must a name mean something? Asked Alice doubtfully. Although Y2K is a sheer semiotic event in that it is not textual, ideological, representational, intentional, or phenomenological, Y2K, Teotihuacan, C-1, 0K plus 100, mixes dates and acronyms in the critical, criterial semiotic clusters that are not signifiers or arbitrary signs because what they say is no different from the way they are built. They can mean whatever Humpatatum chooses, but none of that matters. Beyond the domain of the fuzz god lies the non-signifying chatter of unconscious numeric pandemonium, where names are crypto-modules, meaningless packets of effective information, imminently productive machine jargons. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty and Dumpty in his place again. It all comes unstuck at the end. Y2K closes down the age of the fuzz god, however the Gregorian Achaemenon responds, and not even martial law can stop that. The AoE focuses on a single problem, acknowledging no other, how to reproduce magical power across discontinuity. As Humpatatum gets smashed on New Year's Eve, substitute powers await their chance and their destiny sober, patient, and totally ruthless. The question is, said Humpty Dumpty, which is to be master, that's all. So, because I'm having some technical issues, and I'm not sure if this stream is going to crash on me again, I'm going to go ahead and put this up for this session. I really hope you enjoyed. I enjoyed it, as I always do, especially when it's Freaks Like Nick Land. Next week, we're going to get into the phenomenology of spirit. And if you haven't caught up on the post about that, I'm going to switch between phenomenology and a different reading or work or writer, theorist even, every other week. So it's not all Hegel all the time, because I don't think anyone could handle that. I couldn't handle that. So it's going to be Hegel next week, and then after that, I'm thinking Baudrillard. So again, I loved it as always, and good night from your Philbook Doomer GF. Let's end this live video. All right, you have a great night, guys. Bye.